Yeah, it's great to see them all over TV. It's too bad it's the timing of it, I guess, if it had to happen. But so do you think that it's possible that, you know, the American people or somebody in the state is going to have to figure out, like the guy that came forward who was the head of the Congressional Budget Office who said, hey, we're an empire like Rome and we can't do it, we're going bankrupt. You know, there are people like that inside the state, right? Is there any chance that this will actually be the end of the empire?
As you point out, you know, the key pillar of the empire is the dollar, is the world reserve currency. This is one of the reasons the U.S. maintains its troops in so many different countries. It's why we're still occupying Germany and Japan all these years after World War II. Because if there's a guy with atomic weapons living in your backyard and he asks you for a loan, you're not going to turn him down. So this is one of the reasons that the U.S. maintains the empire. But who knows? I mean, what they're doing in their present non-crisis, and it's only a crisis for Wall Street and some banks, this is not a crisis for the rest of us, that despite the unbelievable hysterical propaganda from Bush and from all the rest of these officials about how the world is coming to an end if we don't immediately send $1 quadrillion to Goldman Sachs. But all this stuff they're doing can bring down the dollar. It's dollars dropping as against other currencies, even against other inflationary fiat currencies. And as Ron Paul has pointed out, this can actually wreck the dollar. And don't believe the $700 billion figure. There's never been a government spending projection that was accurate. They always deliberately understate it. And then, of course, everything they do costs more than what they think anyway. So, I don't know, what is this going to be, a $1.5 trillion bailout, a $2 trillion bailout? Then they have to bail out the FDIC. I think most alarming, and they actually tried this in the 30s, despite what Ben Bernanke lied about to Ron Paul. They did not try to liquidate anything. Hoover was a big inflationist, just like Roosevelt. In the famous phrase, when they pushed on a string, the other side didn't react. Nobody wanted to borrow any money in the Depression. No banks wanted to be involved in lending money. And so despite the Federal Reserve's attempts to inflate, it didn't work, and there was a big deflation. The one great thing about a depression, by the way, is deflation, that you may be poor, but prices are lower. But, of course, the government did everything possible to keep prices up, thereby robbing people of the one good thing that results from an economic downturn. Mm-hmm. So here we are with the exact same thing going on now. And, yeah, this actually could bring down the empire. The whole regime is threatened by this. This is not good for them, even though I guess they probably, by bribing, by threatening, by bludgeoning, they will get this bailout through. But they've made a decision, if necessary, to bring on hyperinflation to make sure that nobody on Wall Street gets hurt. I mean, they're actually choosing the Weimar solution. They're choosing to do what the Weimar German government did when they were illegitimately loaded with war reparations, even though Germany was not responsible for starting World War I, but they were treated as if they were. And they made the decision to just print up money to pay the debt.
You think it could be that bad,
that same decision?
You think it could really be that bad, a hyperinflation?
Oh, yeah. Because it's not that these guys sit down and say, well, we don't care if there's going to be hyperinflation, we're still going to do it. Because, of course, they're too much the masters of the universe in their own mind, but they're not actually in control, because hyperinflation depends on what's in our heads. It's how we value the dollar. It's what we think economic conditions are. It's what we think that the future inflation rate is going to be. When I say they've made the decision to go for hyperinflation, I don't think anybody's consciously made that decision. But the decisions they're making can bring on hyperinflation. And they definitely are making the decision to print as versus liquidate. So what the only healthy, moral, rational thing to do in the current situation is to let the bankrupt go bankrupt, let prices of housing and other things fall to their market level, and then you build for the future. Bob Higgs and others point out, again, this is not a crisis for America, not a crisis for the world. It's only a crisis for certain plutocratic business interests. And, of course, they, in some sense, own the state, or certainly the state and they are in partnership. And we already have a fascist economy. It's being made more fascist even as we watch over these last couple of weeks. They're having trouble because they didn't have time to weave their normal propaganda curtain to cover this up. it's a little too openly a bailout of billionaires by regular working people. They couldn't quite disguise that. That's why they're having trouble. And I'm afraid they're going to get it through. I hope to goodness that they don't. But, if Obama had a decent unowned bone in his body, he would come out against this bailout and immediately be elected president and be the hero of the Western world. But his biggest donor is Goldman Sachs. So he's Bear Stearns and former Lehman Brothers and all these firms are big backers of Obama, just like they are of McCain. So these guys are both wholly owned. They talked today about rising above politics to all endorse the bailout. Well, of course, the bailout is politics. It's ridiculous lies of the regime. The most vicious kind of politics is robbing, the poor to enrich the rich, and the government itself. It's the American system, but it sure is an outrage. And we could certainly hope and pray that there's a chance to stop it. But I'm afraid they're going to fasten it on us. On the other hand, it's diminished the regime's legitimacy. Everybody sees them for what they are, as Murray Rothbard said, a gang of thieves writ large. They're not doing this in the public interest or whatever. No American is for this. This is the entire American people versus the state and the power elite. It's a great moment. And if we ever are able to bring down the regime, if we're ever able to reestablish freedom, if we're ever able to end the fascist system that has been fastened on us and on the rest of the world by the U.S. government, this is what it will look like. You'll see the entire people united against the state and the power elite, and that time the bad guys won't be able to stand against us.
Well, and I like to think that even though Ron didn't get the nomination, that he spent enough time invoking America's best traditions and the founders and the Constitution and liberty and free markets and property rights to kind of remind the American people, at least, that they've heard of that stuff before, that maybe we'll turn to a more market-based solution when this thing is passed rather than another New Deal. But I don't know.
Well, Ron Paul, of course, is a hero. I mean, he is the great libertarian hero. And look at him in this crisis. Look at what he's saying. Just the other day, he was denounced in all the Texas papers for refusing to vote. The only guy in Texas to refuse to vote for the welfare for victims of Hurricane Ike. And they are victimized. They've been victimized by the Houston and Texas government, of course, and the U.S. government and FEMA. But Ron wouldn't vote for it. So he doesn't believe for welfare, even for his own congressional district. What a man. I mean, he just is such a great libertarian. And he actually knows economics. I mean, he doesn't formally have his degree is in medicine rather than in economics, but he is an economist. He's a great economist, and he's the great teacher of the Austrian school. He's taught millions of people about real economics, about sound money, about sound banking, about the evil of the Federal Reserve over these last, really over the last 30 years, but especially in the presidential campaign. So he's laid the groundwork for the hope we've got for the future. I think there is hope for the future. I think the regime has been damaged by this. If the dollar comes down as the world reserve currency, that will also be good news, although we'll suffer from it, but we're going to suffer no matter what they do. So if the empire is ended, greatest news ever for the American people and for the people of the world. I think they are not entirely in control of the situation. The market is far bigger than the Fed or the government, and they can't actually do this indefinitely. Maybe they're going to get away with it this time. Next time, maybe they won't. At some point, they won't get away with it. Then we'll be in a truly revolutionary situation, and it's the job of libertarians at that point to argue for freedom, for sound money, for sound banking, for no Federal Reserve, no more warfare state, mind our own business, pay attention to our own problems, and become real Americans again.
All right, everybody, that's Lew Rockwell. He's the president of the Ludwig von Mises Institute. Of course, the most popular libertarian website in the world is his LewRockwell.com. Thanks very much for your time today on the show.
Oh, Scott, great to be with you.